we had the technology to monitor and check, and yet one of our own people died directly as a result of EMF poisoning. We have meters that we put on the body and lay people on their bed and say, okay, let's have a look at what you're absorbing overnight. And you've got the lights off, you've got everything off, there's nothing on in the room, and you put a meter on, and sometimes you see 2,200 volts per meter. Colossal values. Anything more than about 30 volts per meter is acknowledged to impact on the way the body responds overnight. The circadian rhythm is basically completely wrecked by that electric field, because the body sees an electric field as light. The reality is there are ways of resolving these things. There are ways of modifying what we do. You just have to focus on how you're going to do it for you and your family.
Empowering yourself to take control of your health is one of the best ways to fight against tyranny. Head over to becomevibrantlyu.com.au and register for upcoming courses run by Ivy Lane and Chris Henderson. These courses are designed to empower you to take control of your health in this modern world full of endless toxins. You're listening to Coffee with Quacks with Ivy Lane and Chris Henderson. These are conversations with our favourite interesting quacks, experts who threaten the mainstream narrative with their interest and skill in genuinely helping humans improve their lives in modern times. This podcast is purely for entertainment purposes only, and anything discussed should not be taken as health advice.
Welcome to Coffee with Quacks, episode 5, which is amazing. We're racking these up really quickly. I think we're doing 2 every Sunday for the next month or so. So I appreciate everybody's support, and I've got another amazing, it must be like talks with Chris's friends, because I've we're tapping into my network here, and Cyril Bourke has been a great help to me in the EMF space. He's also a really good friend and been a colleague, and also helped me on my EMF journey. So we're going to introduce Cyril today and his amazing backstory. Again, just to remind people, Coffee with Quacks was designed to, a little bit of a laugh at the mainstream, because everything is so censored and filtered these days that experts and brilliant minds sort of are shut out. So we're giving them a platform on our Coffee with Quacks YouTube channel, and this is available on all different places, right, Ivy? Like BitChute, and where else can we get this?
We'll be on Rumble soon. It's on Anchor, Spotify. Yeah, that's all at the moment. Oh no, it's on Anchor and Spotify. Yeah, there may be others. I don't know. They sort of upload as they go.
So Cyril, you'll be famous and infamous for coming on our Coffee with Quack. So I just want to introduce sort of my introduction to Cyril, because I was in a space as a health practitioner where I was learning about EMF, and I was getting sucked down the vortex of the internet's trinkets. So buy this sticker for your phone, buy this pendant. And it wasn't actually until I went to Melbourne, I was going down there for 10 days, that staying there reactivated my autoimmune condition. So I couldn't sleep, I couldn't walk. And just synchronistically and serendipitously, via a friend of a friend, I had Cyril's number to call when I was in Melbourne, when I was falling apart. And I got on the phone on a Zoom, I'm saying, mate, what is going on? And he said, where are you? Check the location. He said, is it an older house? Yes. He said, well, you need to go onto my website and have a look at, it's not just mobile phones, it's dirty electricity and dirty power from the wiring in that bedroom. And I just devoured it all and started there. And from then, last 3 or 4 years, I've implemented everything he's told me to do to great effect. And this is why we have you on, mate, because you've got some fantastic practical tips, and also to debunk a few things. So maybe that's the EMF part. Maybe we start with a little bit about your background, because that's your story is really interesting, because you didn't come from a traditional health background or a health practitioner background. You went from military to corporate. So can you start there, mate? I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Look, I guess the start of my working life was working for IBM, the International Business Machines. So You know, they're a giant American corporation, and I was lucky enough to study engineering with them, robotics, silicon chip construction. I was part of the development of hard drives, solid state hard drives, and so yeah, sort of really high tech, quite unique technology. Like if I was in another industry, I never would have had the broad experience I had with that type of detailed technology. And that training, and I have to say the training with IBM was superb, absolutely superb. And it allowed me as an engineer to really explore so many different directions of technology. And through various directions and various things, I ended up working for the British military, and signals and telecommunications, and a whole series. There's a whole story in that side that I won't put on here today. But I then ended up in the oil and gas industry with technologies, underwater intervention, submarines, became a submarine pilot and operating remotely operated vehicles. I ended up as an OCM, an offshore construction manager. So I rose through all the different layers of engineering until I was responsible for multi-billion-dollar jobs, basically, and installations around the world. So I had to be knowledgeable and capable of many, many different technologies. And over the decades, I ended up working all around the world and Singapore and places like that. And I had an accident. Where we were moving an electric motor out of a submarine. My fingers got trapped and they guillotined 2 fingers off. It was a very heavy motor. So I'm standing there in a workshop in a pair of overalls in sort of 40-degree heat, melting down with a ball of meat in my hand, going, okay, we need to go somewhere. And I was really lucky because we weren't offshore at that moment. I was at Loy Yang Offshore Supply Base. So we were actually on shore. If we'd been offshore, they would have just trimmed it up, sewn it over, and you just carry on work. But being in Singapore, we were able to go straight to a hospital, and the closest hospital was actually Changi Prison. So we went straight into Changi Prison, and the surgeons there were superb, and they rebuilt my hand, and basically most people can't even tell which hand it was. They did a really good job. But 2 fingers were rigid, painful, and pretty well useless, even though they'd been attached. 4 years later, I was still in pain, still uncomfortable, and more than that, over those 4 years, I developed ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. My digestive tract had basically failed entirely, and I was bleeding rectally for 4 years straight. And I was taking a lot of expensive drugs that weren't really doing anything. They were partly slowing the bleeding down, and every time I tried to wean myself off those drugs, I'd end up in hospital, basically wrecked, and they'd have to put me back on those drugs. So I felt like I was in a really bad place. And the gastroenterologist used to just say, well, just keep taking the drugs. You will get bowel cancer. That's what they do. But as a result, we'll then cut your gut out. Don't worry, we're monitoring it, and we'll do this. And that really didn't feel like a plan I was wanting to be on board with. So I, through various directions and connections, ended up meeting a gentleman called Douglas Amati, who had spent 25 years of his life setting up the chiropractic board. And he came to my home and actually was there to treat my wife for a birth delivery injury. But he saw what had happened to my hand. And he basically put a device on my hand that was made by the Russians. And that device instantly, and I mean instantly, within 30 seconds, I had full circulation in that hand, full sensation, and you saw the circulation rush through these 2 numb, dead fingers, basically. And I had full color again, full circulation, and they felt like they'd been absolutely hammered, you know, like hit with a hammer sort of thing. The sensations all came back all at once. But over the space of about 2 weeks, I just exercised them. I literally just kept moving them. And I can now play a clarinet or a trumpet and everything. And you can't, you know, I've got full dexterity. Everything's there. So that technology as an engineer, I went, hang on a minute, I've got all these expensive doctors who just want me to keep taking poisons. And in one moment, I had a technology in my hand that actually reset my body and made it function properly. So as an engineer, I really wanted to know about it. And in the end, I studied with the Russians. I became a trainer for them. I ended up helping develop sort of other technologies within that realm. And eventually I ended up working as a pain management specialist. I retrained and I opened a clinic, and I just like dived into biofeedback. So I became quite well known for biofeedback and that type of technology. So I totally redirected my engineering background into another topic, so to speak. Now, over the following years, one of the companies I was involved with had a scanning system, and I was able to use that to test clients, and we were looking at changes in biological and electrical fields of the body. And one of those was tagged to EMF. In fact, it had several tags. It had like microwave and computers and EMF and low frequency stuff. And basically we were able to subdivide the spectrum and actually see its impact on the body. Now, this was, as an engineer, I really got quite interested and excited about it and started focusing on it. And simultaneously, something was happening in the clinic where my colleague and very dear friend, Rose Heyman, who had set up the clinic, she was now working at home, deciding to use a mobile phone and an Apple Air laptop. So she was using Wi-Fi and a mobile phone. And she had quite a lot of hair, long hair, and she didn't like having a headset in her ear. So she would just always put the phone next to her head. And she was a very popular therapist. She always was 100% booked out, and she would be on the phone for more than 8 to 10 hours a day. After 3 years of working at home, in a similar way to the COVID people have been doing, you know, where they've been at home using their phones, being told, you know, you work from home, and everything's on a mobile and on Wi-Fi computers, etc. It took 3 years, and she died of a brain tumor. At about, I think she was 52 when she died. Now, we had the technology to monitor and check, and yet one of our own people died directly as a result of EMF poisoning. So that really, you know, really hit home to me. So by then, I basically decided to leave the healthcare role and actually refocus into EMF itself and understand what's really happening. Because at the time, people really only spoke about maybe overhead power lines and mobile phones. And with the advent of 5G, which peculiarly enough has actually done society a favor, because it was a flag where people suddenly went, hang on a minute, this is supposed to be a telephone technology, but everything's telling me it's not, it's something else. And the type of modulation that's being used isn't there benefiting your mobile phone, really. It's being used for many other things, or has the capability of being abused, should we say. So suddenly there was this momentum in the public where they wanted to know, well, what's really happening with my mobile phone, my EMF? And then that was sort of where I started really coming in and going, okay, well, yes, there are problems with your mobile phone, but there's also problems with the way you're using your computer and your Wi-Fi and your smartwatch, and your accumulative values in your house are being rammed up well beyond ever intended values through having an Internet of Things, where you've got everything that's talking and trying to get onto your Wi-Fi or Bluetooth and communicate. So instead of having a singular device in your house that might have been your mobile phone 20 years ago, now it's everything. Everything was trying to communicate and produce an electric field, and resultant magnetics from things like power and solar inverters. So it suddenly became a massive topic. So in some ways, the advent of 5G has really woken the public up, and that's the benefit. People are thinking about it. People are really going, okay, well, do I really need a child monitor that's got a camera and you know, and 10 kilometers of range so I can go to the shops and check my child when I'm at shops, and you know, all this lunacy. So people are starting to rethink it, and we're able to now help people in their homes. We do design work, we do many things. So that's the sort of journey that's occurred, and now I'm literally involved in the development of new ways of cleaning up power in homes. So yeah, I guess from start to finish, I went from engineering to the military to more engineering to having to understand healthcare myself, and then becoming a professional in it, and actually then lecturing. Used to lecture very large classes on EMF and electric fields and things of this nature. And then actually now my role, I actually yesterday morning I was doing work for Royal Melbourne Hospital, where they employ me through our other brand, which is EMF Safety, and then we provide professional test equipment, monitoring equipment, and advice in the commercial world, as well as through EMF Busters Australia, through you know, domestic households and sort of small scale businesses. So I'm now involved in both sides of the industry, so to speak, the professional side, where we literally support NASA Australia, talk to us about equipment that they use and need, and we provide that type of equipment. We've had the Australian military contact us regarding armaments where they have storage of equipment and they need monitoring. We've had all the telephone companies, the power companies. I wrote the 5G testing procedures in Queensland with Energex to help them install 5G. And I'm not a supporter of 5G at all, but the installers themselves were injuring themselves with the technology. In meetings, they literally tell you they go onto roofs, try and install stuff, and they come away with bleeding noses and headaches and nausea and stumbling. That's members of our Australian community injuring themselves at work, and they don't even know why. Well, it's microwave energy. So we had to provide them with 5G monitoring test equipment. So they wear monitors so they know they're walking into these dangerous areas. So, you know, I get involved in all these areas to basically help people and stop them from hurting themselves, and try and prevent future illness and disease, or reduce it as much as possible. It's been a very interesting journey, and we're still, you know, developing things right now that hopefully later on this year we'll have whole house filters for dirty power and actually clean power up for them in a way that nobody else has been able to do globally. And we've tested, unfortunately, an awful lot of filtering and house test equipment, and we've had to send it all back because it doesn't work. I get solar companies that come to us and say, "Oh, we've got pure sine wave. Can you test it, and we can use that in the marketing." We go, "Great," and I test it, and it's not in any way a pure sine wave. It's horrendously chopped up and affecting the biology of the body immediately. So hence we've had to start a project to create a whole house filter.
So what's that sine wave? Can you just explain that for those of us who don't know?
Look, when people are trying to sell you an inverter, solar inverter, they say, "Oh, it's a pure sine wave," right? So they're talking about 50 hertz supply, so or the 60 hertz supply, depending on where you are in the world. So that's just how often it goes negative, positive, so to speak. It's an AC signal, so it's an alternating current. So it's perceived to go one way and then perceived to go the other, but it does that through a sinusoidal waveform like that. So it just goes up and down, up and down. Well, when you actually put it on a proper oscilloscope, and I've got like a $10,000 mobile scope here, and if you put in an ubiquitous filter, so you can actually pull out the predominant value and actually see the detail that's going on, they all look horrendous. And it's the same work that David Stetzer and Dr. Graham, or Professor Graham in Canada, what they found when they were looking at dirty power and doing biological testing. It's the body literally being assaulted by an electric field, and it's in everybody's bedroom. Everybody goes to bed with the power on in the walls. I mean, even if you don't have anything plugged in, like a bedside lamp or anything of this nature, even if you don't have those things plugged in, most people, particularly in Australia, they have a power point, a general purpose outlet, either side of the headboard, and there's a cable running between the two. Your head's probably only about that far from an electric cable, and it's pulsating 50 hertz. Well, the wavelength of 50 hertz is so big, it just goes through virtually anything. And it literally goes right through your body. We have meters that we put on the body, lay people on their bed, and we say, okay, let's have a look at what you're absorbing overnight. And you've got the lights off, you've got everything off, there's nothing on in the room, and you put a meter on, and sometimes you see 2,200 volts per meter. Colossal values. Anything more than about 30 volts per meter is acknowledged to impact on the way the body responds overnight. The circadian rhythm is basically completely wrecked by that electric field, because the body sees an electric field as light. Okay, because light, out this window I see light. Light is an electric field. It's one that we've been created to react to, and that's how we moderate our hormones and growth cycles and health. Now, if your body sees light on you overnight, it won't release the melatonin properly. You won't detox overnight. Your brain won't shrink in the cranial cavity, which causes a vacuum, basically pulls the lymphatic system up into the brain and then cleans the brain overnight. It detoxes you. So if you go to bed with the power on in your room, you will never, ever get the depths of sleep you thought you should. In fact, REM sleep is basically shut down. Now, REM sleep is vital for your mental health as well as detoxing the body. In fact, we've done some experiments where we've had people ring up, and very often they might be at a great distance from us, and we can't just go there straight away and sort of try and help them immediately. They might be on the other side of the country, and they ring up and say, okay, what can I do right now until you get here? What can I do? And we'll say, well, first thing, let's do an experiment. One, don't take your phone in your bedroom. Please, just turn it off or put it away and stop using it in bed. And there's a number of issues. One is obviously you're radiating yourself, but two, the blue light from the screens and the stimulation, all of that's going to have an impact. And then you say, okay, well, don't run an extension lead under your bed. Okay. Don't run power cables there. And if you can, let's just go to wherever your meter box is and turn the power off. And at this point, lots of people go, oh, what about my fridge and all this? Well, if you've got multiple circuits in your house, you'll often find maybe the kitchen isn't tied to the bedroom. Mm-hmm. There is a bit of a caveat on that, though, because sometimes the wiring might go past the bedrooms to the kitchen. And then, of course, what happens is, even though it might not be powering your bedroom, it might not be attached to the general purpose outlets in the wall, you still might have power in the wall from, or the ceiling from, a cable that's live still going to the kitchen. So you have to be really competent and capable to work out where is the wiring likely to be. Now, we can measure everything and see where it is. But if over a phone, if you can guide somebody to either turn off all the power or some of the power to reduce what's in the house, then in their bedroom and hopefully the adjacent rooms to their bedroom don't have any power, because the 50 hertz supply that we have here in Australia, we can measure it at least 4 meters from the wire. 4 meters. That's across one room. And if you imagine, it might be in another room coming to you as well. It could be under your floor. It could be in your ceiling. There's lots of different ways that you might get within 4 meters of a live cable. And your body is absolutely perfect to pick up and absorb the electric field. It's what it does. We are a saltwater mineral solution. It doesn't transmit electricity any better. Literally, we are perfect for it. So we pick up these electric fields like an antenna, and then it messes basically with our functions overnight, because overnight you're supposed to be in your cave, right? Let's go back a million years. Go back into your cave, okay? Your fire you know, and you've got nothing coming in to disturb you. Well, unfortunately, the modern room is full of electric fields, and it's like having the sun beaming down on you. It stops the proper sleeping cycles. I was going to explain some of the people we asked to turn it off at a distance, and as in, you know, we can't be there straight away, so to speak. I've had one of them, they rang me back like following morning, or 2 days later, I think it was. And they said they were seeing trolls in their kitchen, and there were dragons in their fridge, and they had all these mythical characters in their home, and they were delirious, staggering around. What's happened? They're finally dreaming, finally them sleep. It's true. That's what happens sometimes. People start detoxing, finally. Well, everybody wants to detox. Everybody wants to eat well. They want to buy organic, etc., etc. If you don't turn the power off, you're wasting your time. It's as simple as that. You have to turn the power off or shield the room. That's straightforward.
Cyril, can I jump in quickly? I just want to dig down on a couple of things, but I've worked with Cyril doing this process, right? So Cyril came to the house. He went through the meter box, measured my on-body voltage, and it was through the roof. We turned most of the circuits off, and what we found was there's electrical wiring going under the Queenslander, under the house, to the shed next door that's separate to the house, right? Turn that last circuit off, boof, gone. Everything was gone.
We got a postie beeping at the door.
Didn't hear him.
She's at the gate, a few yards away from me.
Tell me a podcast. We didn't hear anything. So yeah, I could see in real time how the voltage I was picking up from that wire that was under the live and active under the bed, and also with the mattress having springs in it, was becoming like an antenna into the body. So since that day, we've turned that circuit off to the bedroom, and I slept like a baby for the first time. Like, I've done other mitigations too that Cyril has suggested, but I want to sort of go back, because I think most viewers understand, mobile phones, Wi-Fi, things like that. But when I first met you, you dragged me all the way back to prehistoric times, which was pre-phones, right? So let's go back into the 70s and 80s. The military have done studies on EMF, and they've advised government that this is a potential toxin. But as far as I understand, the report said if you want to commercialize the product, you can't, legislate too heavily on it, right? So I like to go into why did we get to this point, because I started to read books about dirty electricity, and maybe we start there too, because dirty power, when they start to roll power out to the countryside, epidemiologists who get records can see incidences of cancer for the first time. You've got to go back in history to understand where we are now. So can you go back to say, the dirty power story and dirty electricity, what it is and why it's so damaging, and maybe bring out that story you told me about the Russian and the US governments using it against each other in the Cold War.
Yes, yeah. Look, that's another thing again. That's that particular element was informational medicine they were using. So they were using patterns of information that the body uses to manage the illness, inflammation, react to certain environmental poisons, etc. So the body has certain patterns that it actually uses, and the informational medicine it's referred to. So those patterns are a little bit like the type of information that are held for homeopathy, where they have codes, they have rates, which are like 64-digit numbers, basically. They're actually analogs, and they have information patterns that can represent, for example, a mineral or a toxin that often can be a mineral, like arsenic and other things like that. It can represent maybe an oil that comes from a plant or a herb or things of this nature. So you can capture matter in a informational way and then dose the body with it. And homeopathy does that. So they use a reaction, they use a toxic reaction to trigger an event in the body to try and dumb down the body's reaction to it. They call it a like-to-like process. So the body then gets a taste of the poison, but at a smaller level, and then tries to null out that reaction. That's what homeopathy is. Well, the military started using the same type of technology and actually putting it onto the airwaves, basically. And they were feeding it into embassies. And it has come out now. The Americans knew that the Russians were poisoning their embassy. One that was going on with the Russians and Americans, where the Russians were toxifying the embassy, that was informational medicine. That you wouldn't be reading it on RF test equipment. It was undetectable what they were doing. But the nuclear physicist Bearden, he actually worked it out and alerted the Americans to it, and they actually continued to allow the staff to be in that embassy because they wanted to see how effective it was. They didn't tell the staff, and they poisoned them all. They basically made them live guinea pigs, so to speak. So they don't sacrifice their own staff to test that out, and that's very well documented now.
And there's still compensation going on with those families. I think it's an ongoing compensation that was paid.
Yeah, look. I mean, compensation is just a silly thing. There's an awful lot.
It's a admission of harm. Yeah.
And yet all of this stuff doesn't work, allegedly. None of it's real.
The pharmaceutical industries are there to sell you items, chemistries, but they absolutely will never, ever want you to heal. And that's why I don't work for the medical system anymore, because we actually set up a study. I was asked to do a study at Nambour Hospital, which is a public hospital. And one of the surgeons there was, he had been secretly sending us clients because we've got higher and higher results. And I say secretly, he didn't want us to know he was sending them because he wanted to see the results. So he was sending them to our clinic, and we were using biofeedback to deal with frozen shoulders and hanging healings, things that weren't working properly, like broken legs that 4 months later still weren't healing, and they would look like they were still just a start of break sort of thing. He would send us patients in 2 to 3 weeks. Just about every single patient had resolved their issue by using informational biofeedback to resolve it. And he wanted to set up a study, so he got 170 something doctors he put on the register on the Sunshine Coast to send us clients. And the hospital sent a letter out asking them to take part in a frozen shoulder study with no drugs and no surgery, and it would be sort of a new technology. And every single doctor that was written to sent their own letter back. They'd all been coached on saying, no, we won't do a non-drug, no surgery study. So Nambour Hospital couldn't go ahead with the study. And from that point, we realized that the level of criminality in the medical system was so bad. They literally were controlled. All the doctors were totally controlled. They wouldn't take part. They felt as if their jobs were on the line because their controlling body has a massive stake in the pharmaceutical industry. And that's just the way it is. You can't get past it. That's what happened. So I realized that, being a non-subscribing professional in the medical world, I didn't want to be involved. So I'm capable of redirecting my energy elsewhere, and that's what I did. So I went back into engineering, and now I'm helping people to stay out of that system by actually staying healthy and understanding what's really going on in their homes.
And Cyril, in relation to, so I probably dragged it down the rabbit hole of the government, which I've got to be careful of doing because that's what I like to do. But when in discussions with you, you mentioned that when you put an oscilloscope on a house, like you did per hours and other houses, you see that you see the dirty electricity coming in over the normal sine wave, and you said that in that range, you see dirty electricity. So can you explain why that's a problem? Because I think that's what was affecting me originally when I was in an old house. had everything else turned off, and I was just getting fried. So can you explain, and can you explain why, like, you know, green energy like solar is great, but these inverters are shocking when you go and test them, and they're polluting the whole house?
It'd probably be worth going back to the cause of this. Okay, if we go back 30 years or so, right, we used to have light bulbs with a piece of wire and a condensant light, and you had a curly piece of wire, you run current through it, it would heat up, bring light and heat, and you would illuminate the room. That's what's known as a resistive component. So it's resistive. It releases the energy by causing a resistance in the wire. If you went and had a look at your oven, okay, if it was an electric oven, you've got thick rods in there, which again are resistive. The current runs through it, heat up, and then that energy is providing heat for cooking. Your kettle, your toaster, just about everything in your house used to be a resistive energy of some sort. Okay, now as transistors started to be used, they made televisions and things that didn't need to use the 220 volts that we use in the house. Okay, what they do is, like, your average TV runs on about 48 volts, but you plug 220 in. So what's going on? There's a power supply in there, and it's full of transistors, it's full of capacitors, it's full of circuitry that will pull off the amount of voltage you want for different areas of the circuit. But what does it do with the rest of it, right? Well, to reduce the voltages, it chops it up and then lets some of it out back into the household circuit, and the rest of it uses. So it's chopping the electricity up. It becomes a spike. And also with transistors and capacitors, you get what's known as like an out of phase energy. So you pull the energy in as it's coming in, you hold it, and then you release it as you need it in the device. Now, when you look at it on an oscilloscope, it means that the energy coming in and the energy going out of the circuit are not in phase. They're not just a resistive line where the energy travels in and out, like round a kettle, for example. And when you get this type of circuitry, when you look at the power, you can see what's being released back in, and it's bursts of energy being released. Now, back about 30 years ago here in Australia, we had a lot of house fires. We had a lot of pole fires on the top of power lines. We don't get that now. Now, why is that? Well, it's because those early years where we started to get transistor components in the houses, in the devices, we suddenly found that the neutral, which is supposed to return the energy to the power station, would on occasion momentarily have much more current than what was being provided to the house. So now you've got an imbalance between the energy coming in and the energy going out of the home, and it's doing it in bursts. Now you get 200 houses in a housing estate all bursting energy onto the return line, and eventually you get them adding up. You get an accumulative value where now, instead of everything coming in and out at the same time, you get thumps of electricity, and it causes weakness in isolators, breaks down insulation, and eventually you get hot spots, you get carbon building up, and then it becomes a conductive track, and then eventually you get current running and a fire. That's what happens. That's old wiring in houses, and you get it on poles, on power, power distribution, etc. And that's why they had to make a change. So the International Institute of Electrical Engineers said the only real way to do this is add what's known as a 5-wire system. I won't go into the detail of it, but what it meant was they'd have to buy more wire and put it up, basically, and change the way houses are fed with power. Well, nobody wanted to buy more wire and put it up and rewire houses in that way. So they said, okay, we'll go another way. We'll use a pathway back to the power station that really is set aside for keeping things safe and clean. It's the earth. Okay, so what they've done is they've connected the neutral path, which would normally be back to the power station. And to be honest, neutral I don't know why they called it neutral, because there's nothing neutral about it. It's as live as the live. They look exactly the same when you put it on the oscilloscope. It's just its relationship to Earth is bonded now. So you have what's known as an MEN. That's how it's an acronym for multiple Earth neutral. And I recommend people to look it up, because you look at it and you go, oh, hang on a minute, I understand that drawing. You don't have to be an engineer to understand it at all. It literally is a bond between the Earth and the neutral. It's in your meter box where the breakers are. So they've bonded Earth and neutral together. And now they're using the Earth and the neutral to send things back to the power station. And that takes the excess of the microsurge that's being developed by these devices with transistors and smart devices, anything basically that's not resistive. It's giving them another pathway and stopping that overcurrent. But now we've accepted that we're going to have dirty power on our power, because we haven't cleaned it up. What we've done is literally make it so it doesn't just burn houses down every day. Now, that bursting, that machine gun bursting, is seen on the oscilloscope as very violent spikes. And the body itself receives that through the air, because like a radio station transmitting music, that's an electric field with modulation on it. What's modulation? It's a shape. It's sound shapes, right? So your radio receives these violent shapes and then says, okay, a high one and a low one, and they say, okay, well, we'll make that sound, and it's like gramophone record needles going up and down, being accepted as sound. Well, that's what radio waves do. They have a carrier wave carrying these violent spikes, and we turn them into audio. Well, our body sees the 50 hertz supply just the same as it sees a radio station. It's an EMF being transmitted through the air. And upon that wave, we have this violent spike, and it's continuous and aggressive, 24 hours a day. And that is responded to by the body. It sees it as an aggressive signal that interferes with cellular activity, and then causes, in the testing they found when they went to a granite mine, they went to a granite mine in Kazakhstan, if I remember. It was one of the few places they could find where there was no EMF at all in this deep mine. And then they induced it in different chambers and then did biological testing. And they found it instantaneously provided brittle diabetes in the body is the very first thing people started seeing. But they see it in hormonal reactions, they see it in mental reactions, foggy head syndromes. The list is almost inexhaustible. It produces so many modern symptoms of chronic fatigue, inflammation, and it's dirty power from the walls. The body's picking it up, and that's just one element of it all. David Stetzer in America, the engineer, he actually was involved in the military side of this, and eventually, when he left the military, set up a company to make filters to clean power in people's homes. And they're basically a capacitor across live and neutral in a flame-proof case. But you have to balance the circuits in the house, and that's another topic entirely. But it is very effective, but you must use a meter to do that testing, and you must regularly do tests, maybe a couple of times a year, just to make sure that the values are low enough. Because when your neighbor puts solar on their roof, or if you buy a new television or something with different characteristics, those characteristics will be seen on a dirty power meter, and then you may have to add more filters or change the orientation of things to actually keep that clean. And this is what's driven me towards going, okay, we need another solution to complement these types of filters. So the last 2 years I've been working on actually resolving that with a team of engineers who I met through Energex, the big power company, and they're used to dealing with railway energy issues, very, very large spiking filter systems they work with. And I brought the project to them and said, look, I really see this as an issue. And they said, well, we've never seen this before. And then I took the oscilloscope out and I put it on their desk and I said, okay, have a look at this. And I showed them their power, and they were astonished and they actually shut down the whole factory and then brought the power up bit by bit through their on-grid and through their solar banks that they had on the roof. And they could see that they were producing this issue, and they were also receiving it from the surrounding businesses, because the other businesses around them had solar as well. So it was a beautiful, beautiful situation where they didn't matter if they just bought the power from the grid or if they made their own electricity. They were all producing this rubbish and affecting everybody's health. As a result, that manager actually got me to test his home and show him what was happening in his own home. So they suddenly woke up to the subtleties of what was really happening. And now we've been heavily involved in the development of a filter that really will actually clean the power properly, and then resolve those issues.
So
Cyril,
even if you had a solar panel, like, because a lot of people set them off their houses, you're saying that will still impact what's going, a lot of people.
Depends where they put that. The panels themselves, it doesn't matter. They could be 10 kilometers away in a field. It doesn't matter. It's the power going.
Yeah.
The energy is on the power. So it just comes wherever it is.
And it's the inverter, right? Like this quality of inverters. And the example Cyril gave had the exact example with a neighbor. We were helping a neighbor where I live who's a farmer who's chemically sensitive, and we went and tested his house, and dirty power was off the scale. He was ready to jump off a bridge. And we balanced it all out with filters, and he then calmed down, and 4 or 5 weeks later he could sleep and things were good. He then went insuringly without telling me and got his inverter changed, which rendered the filters useless in the house, and the levels were high again. So this is where this solution that Cyril's bringing with the whole of house filter is going to trump any potential issue with that and clean it all out. So just so listeners know, Cyril, there's a book called Dirty Electricity by Sam Millam, who is a epidemiologist, and that was the first book I read, after Cyril got me away from all the pendants and things. And in his book, it's all these guys like Cyril who raise the bar, and they're against the mainstream. Like Sam was an epidemiologist where he'd come and test dirty power in schools where there was cancer clusters, and they'd get other epidemiologists to come through or getting paid by various companies and say, no, there wasn't a problem there, right? But, he was doing, Cyril, if you remind me, Sam was doing testing with librarians and hormones in female librarians in the 80s and cleaning up the dirty power and seeing unbelievable changes in the hormone balance. And this is pre-mobile phone.
Yeah, that's the scary part,
That's the scary part. We have layer
most
upon
people's whole lives.
This is unbelievable when you go back and see it.
Yeah, look, Samuel Millam, his book is really interesting, and he was able to compare the conditions, health conditions, because they had really good records prior to the rollout of electricity in the areas that he was referencing. So he could see the medical systems change entirely, or should I say the health system being, the type of conditions that people were bringing in totally changed when they started bringing the power in. So yeah, it was really very distinct. And that was prior to putting dirty power on that electricity, because that was still just resistive elements. So yeah, the situation is we add more and more modulation on the power, the worse it gets. It is a problem, but it is also something we've got firmly in our sights. In fact, the dirty power, they did a number of studies in schools. And Marga Havas, I think it is.
Magda Havas, yeah.
Magda Havas. She did several in schools, I think in Canada, and they saw big changes in behaviour of both students and children. The outcomes were very distinct. Now, here in Australia, they did a study in South Australia. They started to see very big changes in the schools, and the whole study was scuttled. They shut it down, they buried the data, and they basically didn't want anybody to know about it or talk about it. And I've only had the information from insiders who were involved in the study. And they said the results were so astonishing, so fast, children's behavior, everything. And they realized that it was proving that filtering was really needed. And they didn't want to help the children in the schools. They really didn't want to be involved and admit to the situation that's occurring.
Cost and liability is what they think about,
Yeah,
isn't it?
Well,
Like,
exactly.
if you tell the, you know, Ivy as a mother that you've damaged her children, you probably have a massive class action on your hands within about 5 minutes.
But then I go that other step, Chris, where it's like the way that I see it, because I see so many children who do struggle. You know, my children are very sensitive, but I mitigate what I can. But, you know, I see other kids struggling, and that, you know, kids come home from school and they've just been bombarded. They've got these behavioral issues. People don't know what to do. They go get diagnoses. These kids get on medication, and it just goes on and on and on. So I think it's all combined. It's more than just litigation.
There's an agenda of dumbing down the public so they're fodder for a system that controls them. This is what's going on.
And I want to mention that. I want to go there because going back to the fact that military did the studies on RF in the 70s, you know, they did reports. It's a known biological toxin that causes XYZ. Irrespective of that, it's used, it's commercialized, and then the public, and as I said, I'm building a course around this for the public, and I work with Cyril in relation to that. But can you speak? What blows my mind? I'm trying not to ramble, but what blows my mind is the industry themselves give definitions of safety. And what I've been looking into, they say, you know, when they were testing mobile phones back in the 90s, which is the same standard they hold on today, irrespective of smartphones and everything increasing, 6 minutes a day, and you've exceeded the heating standard. 6 minutes a day on the mobile, and 30 minutes cumulative. This is in the 90s. This is the standards they set and still exist today, and the consumer and the customer knows nothing about that whatsoever.
You're talking about the ICNIP 98 standard. That's what it is, right? Non-ionizing standard. And it was based on technology that's not even in use today. There were mobile phones that people don't have in their hands anymore, you know? And we've had multiple rollouts of technology, and they haven't repeated the tests. And even now we fail. Everybody that's got a mobile phone virtually fails to adhere to that standard that was in 98. And it's not relevant with the machines we've got in our hands today. How many people just have a 6-minute telephone call? Like my colleague at the pain management clinic, I mean, she was using it for 8-10 hours a day, not 6 minutes a day and 30 accumulative over a week. And they said that was the maximum anybody would bother using, because it's so expensive to operate a mobile phone. That's what they actually put in their notes in 1998.
Well, they did, because all they expected you to use it for was text and talk. Yeah. And now we run all this data over it, you know, and it's just blown out of control. So in relation to that, Cyril, can you, because I think, you know, we don't want to overwhelm people in terms of, we know it's just crazy. So if you bring it back into a house, you know, and dig down and go, okay, you have to create a safe space in your house and a safe space to sleep. When you go out there, you're exposed, but you've got to create a sanctuary, right? So where would someone start in that regard? I want to make my house safer. I want to dig into that. Yeah,
look, you're absolutely right. Looking at it all, I mean, we dug up so many things that we found were just crazy. So we had to go, how the hell do we deal with this, and how do we protect people? What have we got that will resolve most things? And it's the understanding that your body is amazing. The human body is amazing because it can detox and it can remove the problems, right? But it can't do that unless it gets a moment of time where it's not exposed to these things. Okay, it's like alcoholism. You know, if you drink all day and all night, you're not going to last long.
Well, that's what we're doing, right? We're exposed all day and all night, all day and all night.
if you only drink during the daylight hours, you've got a much better chance of surviving, okay? And that's really what it is, right? So overnight, you have to stop, and that's where we help, right? We go in and we go measure the home, measure the bedroom, and go, okay, well, you're planning on spending 6-8 hours in your bedroom, maybe, right? So let's work with that. And we literally isolate the room with shielding paints or canopies. We'll work with the glass and put in shielding materials that operate in exactly the same way as a tint. It looks like a tint, or some of them, you know, we can have that are virtually clear, but they still shut down the electric field coming in at the frequencies of telecom and Wi-Fi. We put stainless steel under floors if needed as a mesh. We've got lots of different materials, fabrics and other elements. We've got additives if people have things like vertical joints, wooden walls and things of this nature. So we've got lots of different ways of making that room a Faraday cage. And a Faraday cage, lots of people confuse a Faraday cage with a chicken cage. You know, they think it's going to look like wire and, you know, they got to lock themselves in and all the rest of it. You walk into a modern room where we've Faradayed it, we've shielded it, and it looks like a perfect room. It looks like a normal room. There's no strange anything in there. It's just a painted house, a painted room. But the paint on the wall has carbon in it, high carbon, that we import from Germany. We're the importers, and we then distribute it to building biologists and engineers all around the country. And then we help people make sure that it meets building standards by having it earthed. We make sure that the canopies operate properly by measuring inside and out. We make sure that the window foils are installed by professionals that we work with and train and guide. The same as we've got contractor painters who are very experienced in the application of these particular paints. We help people plan, for example, canopies for specialist locations. Like recently we had a Mercedes bus, and they have hammocks for the drivers and things of this nature over the driver's cockpit area. So when that hammock bunk comes down, now they've got a shielding canopy that shields in that space, specially made for them. So there's lots of different ways we problem solve for people.
And make sure they part of the course we're building is to try and get people's behavior changed around the devices. So getting into the flow of turning the Wi-Fi off at night, getting into the flow of, if you're using the phone and it's on speakerphone at a distance with, you know, air tube headsets and things like that. So trying to get the behavior change is what we're trying to do. But when I've been building this course, you know, what I've realized is the industry is quite sneaky because they've hacked our dopamine. They've hacked our dopamine with that, with notifications, with bings, with signals, with connecting to our brain chemistry. So that you have to deal like that's a detox agent too, right? Like, how do you disconnect from this pacifier that you like? I still have a meltdown if I lose a mobile phone. I'm like, holy shit, where is it? My whole life exists around it. So can you speak to that a little bit? Because that's
look, it's a behavior change. People have to sit down and really get their head around what's going on. Okay. And I don't mean paranoia where you just can't think of anything else. But once you make yourself a few ground rules, you can change your exposure dramatically. Like the mobile phone, right? Why have you got it in your pocket, right? You don't need to put it in your pocket, because inside the phone, in the instructions, it says, do not place near the body. Do not place near the head. Do not carry on the person. This is what it says. But that's because they know it does that. It does cause issues. So the first thing is the mobile phone in your hand is radiating right into all the things from an energy point of view. Your body, from like a Chinese medicine or Sujok Moxa from the Korean hand and foot massage and reflexology, your whole body is represented in your hand. So why stick a microwave energy into it? You wouldn't put your arm in a microwave oven and turn it on, would you? But it's the same type of thing, right? It's the microwave transmitter right through your body in the hand. So the mobile phone, like I did some tests on an Apple phone, and the values I was getting was about 12 microwatts per meter squared. And that value doesn't mean anything until you compare it against arm's length. If you just reach out and put the phone at arm's length at the desk, it drops to, on that particular phone, it dropped to 0.007. 0.007, not 12, you know? So you don't have to understand engineering or the calculations on it to go, well, that's a lot less. That's the first thing. So instead of having the phone in your pocket all the time, put it, when you're in the car, put it on the far seat, right? Or put it somewhere else. Rethink whether you really need to use Bluetooth in your car, right? Start using your CDs again, or something, or hardwire it, because a lot of the car stereos still have a USB input, and you can you know, put music in multiple ways from recordings you can hold on your phone without having to continuously transmit to the web. The convenience of being able to stream continuously is literally wearing people out and exhausting. So the other thing is to change the message on your phone. And this one has lots of benefits. Change your message. Say, like, hi, this is me. I check my phone 10 times a day. Please leave a message. I look forward to speaking to you. Now you've just given them permission to leave a message, and you're going to get back to them, and there's no issue. You're looking forward to it. But you've just freed yourself up for the next 2 hours or so. You know, if you set a timer every hour to check your phone, those spaces in between, you actually get to do jobs, you get to work, you get to do things that you need to do without somebody keep calling you and you being on a string where they just keep pulling it, wanting a response. It gives you time to focus and get things done. And it means you're not hugging the phone all day, hoping to get yet another call. Just put a timer on. Every hour you just check the phone and turn it off again. Really makes a big difference.
If you think about that, if you think about that issue and like how it's designed now, everyone's got phones, all the apps are in there, they're pinging all the time. So you feel that you can't let it go. Like it's a real addiction.
For me, it's children. I could put my phone away and forget about it. If I'm not with my kids, it's how they contact me. That's how I've got roped in it. So if I'm not staying at home, I need my phone near me at night time in case they need me, because they've got no one else to go to if they
can't. You don't have
a
fixed line, do you?
Well, I meant to, but it doesn't work.
Yeah. Like we go back to the 80s.
If I'm not home and I'm out, that's how they connect to me, and it's that. And I'm really conscious of it. If I'm not sleeping at home, it's like I need my phone to. There's an anxiety there that comes in, because what if my children are in trouble and they can't reach me, and I can't switch off unless I have my phone near me to go to sleep at night if I'm not at home. And I'm aware of it, but it's like, well, that's how. I mean, but then we think, well, I grew up without mobile phones.
I know.
I was going to say that actually. You've totally been conned by the convenience of it. You really have, and it's causing anxiety and stress. And you need to guide your children on what is sensible activity and how to function. You know, if there's a real big problem, they need to know how to find the fire brigade or an ambulance, or, you know, and if you're out for the whole night, your children are probably old enough to deal with not finding the bread in the freezer, or not, you know, because that's what they're ringing for, or they've forgotten the password for the Wi-Fi at home or something.
Or they're fighting with each other is usually what it is.
They're not. It's you create a scenario that's not a reality. That's paranoia. Right, that's I'm going to miss out. I'm going to miss out. My children this, my children that. What did we do 25 years ago? We made them responsible.
Yeah,
right? And they can still leave a message, and you'll answer it in the morning, and see how they got on. We're supposed to be creating young adults who are capable of coping in the world, not being nursemaided by technology. Really? Yeah.
I can't wait for them to watch this.
But it's not like, I know Ivy very well. I mean, she's done amazing with her children, but it's almost like
It's not just Ivy. It's
Yeah, it's
society.
like-
People,
yeah,
people
generally.
think, I've got family in the UK and they're in the 70s. They might die and they need to be able to ring me straight away. I can't help them. They'll leave a message, and we'll work over the next few days on it. But I don't have to have the phone on all the time. And people make every excuse about, they either understand the problem and go, I need to change the way I use this technology. It needs to be benefit to me, not an anchor that I'm dragging around all the time, making me sick. Because your body will retrieve its health and recover from virtually anything if you stop poisoning it. Okay, and that's the same.
There's a lot of poisons going around.
What you're breathing and what you're exposing yourself to. Okay, the body has that incredible capacity to heal itself. You just actually have to stop poisoning it to do it. So in our case, if you grow your own food, if you're going to, worry terribly about what's on the food, and monitor that, and look at how you're exposing yourself 24 hours a day. It's not that hard. It's just a mental block for a lot of people. Once they realize it and they go, oh, hang on a minute, I need to wire my fridge in a different way. In fact, a lot of times, instead of worrying about what wiring is in the house that's deliberately, going through multiple walls to get to your fridge, and that's the block you want to put in place to say, oh, I can't turn the power off. Just get an electrician to put an independent line from the junction box to your fridge and make sure you're aware of where that new line is, whether it's in the roof or the wall, so that you're totally confident it's not going to bring electricity within 4 meters of the room you're trying to sleep in. And now you're going to leave that one breaker on, and the ones that do affect your bedroom, just turn them off. Okay, now that's one way, and that's can be a bit awkward, but that resolves that one. If you own the house and you want to invest in your bedroom, and the average bedroom costs about $2,500 to $3,000 typically to shield. But for that, you've completely changed that environment. And every night for the rest of your life in that room, your body goes, I can't hear and I can't see any electric fields. So I go into REM sleep, I detox, I reduce inflammation. It just all happens.
You'll be spending $2,500 on supplements to get the sleep for about 2 years.
I was just thinking that, thinking the money you would save. So
yeah, people spend a fortune on alcohol and supplements. You could go
melatonin. Look at the kid. All the kids are on melatonin. Oh, come on.
Yeah.
So Cyril, what about those earthing mats? Are they a solution?
This is a great question.
Look, it's a great question. It's a very loaded question.
To finish listening to this podcast, head over to Coffee with Quacks on Rumble.
You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram and TikTok by searching for Coffee with Quacks.